after being marginalized for so long, Lenin changes some of this emphasis and wants a much greater role to be played by the industrial workers, and he wants them to be at the forefront of the vanguard. And of course, Service is skeptical of his motives. But like I said, reading other sources, it seems what happened was when Bloody Sunday hit, public opinion shifted so much, and organizations came out of the woodwork. Anarchist organizations, communist organizations, agrarian socialist organizations, even liberal organizations, trade unions came out, and Lenin was impressed by this, and he thought he said, I thought that the average industrial worker who is not educated, who may not know how to read very well, shouldn't be the vanguard of the party at that time, and shouldn't be making decisions unless the vanguard of the party educates them on theory. And he says, but after Bloody Sunday, he realized that there was a lot more potential for organization among the industrial working class already that he said he didn't see at the time. And so he argues for an increased role played by the industrial working class. And this kind of shocks everybody at the Third Party Congress. At the Third Party Congress, delegates were also to remember years later, several people wrote memoirs, that when Lenin would go out to the pubs after hours after the Congress and have drinks with people, they all seemed to unanimously agree that he, at the time, told a lot of stories about the agrarian socialist terrorists and the practice of the Jacobins in the French Revolution as well, and that he was still very enamored by those policies, even though he kind of tried to keep a lid on that at times when he felt like other Marxists wouldn't appreciate that. I'm going to have to bridge some of this. Lenin animates the audience of the Third Party with the following slogans: armed insurrection, a provisional revolutionary government, mass terror, the expropriation of gentry land. He runs into some criticism for these inflammatory remarks, but by and large, he seems to capture the spirit of the times, according to the support he received. He publishes his next book, Two Tactics of Russian Social Democracy and the Democratic Revolution, and he expounds on some of his changes and emphases and tactics from what is to be done. He now thinks that the party was formerly too clandestine in their mechanisms. He thinks that they were formerly too slow to set up trade unions and other organizations for the working class. And he writes of this new revolutionary moment that has changed since Bloody Sunday. And then, this is really interesting too, Service writes that what is to be done, this is according to Service, and what is to be done was a tract for its time and situation. Its universal theme was the need for leadership, which stayed constant throughout Lenin's writings, but it offered no permanent detailed prescription for the modalities of party organization. And so Service says that Lenin has changed some of those prescriptions for those modalities. And this is another point of contention, or another point of disagreement between Service and I. Service constantly critiques Lenin for changing his opinions or his tactics. That would be something that I would praise Lenin for, actually, for being flexible and for being willing to change his ideas as the moment changed and as the specific historical context change in which he was operating. After Bloody Sunday, Soviets are formed, and these are small councils run by either peasants or industrial workers or people living in urban areas. They're setting up their own kind of collective councils for self-governance, and these Soviets take off. Trotsky and Lenin had just met at this time in their life, and they become fast friends. Trotsky goes back to Russia to become deputy chair of the Petersburg Soviet. And then Service critiques Lenin for not also returning to Russia. He's invited by the party back to Russia, whenever he's living abroad right now, and party leaders are asking him to come back. and he continually restates that as soon as he steps foot in Russia, he's just going to be arrested, which is absolutely true. And so he says it's just counterproductive for him to come back. And so service, of course, basically is an opportunity to chide Lenin is not being really committed, but I didn't see it that way at all. Finally, the Tsar, bowing to public pressure, issues a manifesto promising universal civil rights and to convoke a state of Duma. Duma is just their word for a legislative assembly there, or a Congress. He does, but with the provision that he can dissolve the Duma at any time. And so the Duma is formed, and the first Duma is in fact dissolved by the Tsar, because he doesn't, because their motions don't meet with his approval. A second Duma is formed, and he dissolves the second. And so Lenin uses this to point out that the belief in reform within the system, as opposed to revolution, is naive, as these Dumas keep getting dissolved. Although Lenin does say that that working within the system for change and promoting revolution at the same time do not have to be mutually exclusive. And so he proposes that party members run for office in the Duma while also at the same time promoting revolution. Maybe I'll leave it here, because this is, the party is formed. They've had several congresses. I've kind of touched upon the factions between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks.
How does the story end?
How does the story end? Titanic sinks. Jesus is crucified. Well, so they've had several congresses. There's a lot of mass movement in the streets that kind of flares up and dies down over the next 8 or 9 years. All party members continue to work. Lenin is putting in long, long days. His doctors are asking him to curtail his involvement because he continues to have these nervous breakdowns, but he doesn't. So over the next several years, they continue to try to work within the Duma as much as possible. They continue to try and promote revolution. Spontaneous revolution is flaring up in the streets, and then World War I hits. So things for a small time take a back seat, and then they flare up all of a sudden, and the Romanov dynasty is overthrown during World War I. And the party believes it's their duty to disengage from involvement in World War I, that it's an imperialist war, and that people are dying for no reason. And so eventually they do just that. But you want to take over from here? Because correct me if I'm wrong, I imagine Leninism will cover mostly from there on, right?
Well, this is actually a theory lecture, but if you want, I can talk about that as well.
I would love it.
Okay.
And if you guys want to, if you have any questions, or we could even wait to do questions until after Greg's done talking, since we're both speaking on Lenin in various forms, and then you can ask us both questions if you have any, if that's all right with you, Greg.
You're the main show, so whatever's fine.
Let's do that.
Do we want to change the battery?
Yeah.
All right.